episode 2 of TeamVE Talks. Earlier this week, I hosted a Zoom webinar Q&A where people had the opportunity to send in their questions or ask live questions on anything related to horse health and wellness or being a professional in the horse industry. So today, we have made this Zoom webinar available to you on YouTube. We're going to explore topics from spring conditioning tips for our horses, cardio and strength training, interval programs, and so much more. So, all you gotta do is grab your morning coffee and tune in. We can't wait.
But before we get started, I just wanted to do a brief kind of introduction for those of you who are not as familiar with Vitality Equine. We are based here in Calgary, Alberta, dedicated to optimizing the health and wellness of equine athletes through science is our main goal. So pictured there in the top right, there's myself on the left, Shelby in the middle, and Caroline on the right. Caroline and I work with horses. Caroline is a kinesiologist for humans, and her passion for horses has led her to bringing body work, and really, honestly, some amazing body work that I've ever seen. So I'm so happy that she's part of the team. Shelby works on kind of behind the scenes with marketing and also with events. And so together we're really passionate about moving the industry forward with three main components through equine therapy modalities such as massage, educational components, and events as well. So our events have been online recently, but pre-COVID and post-COVID, we'll definitely be hosting more local events for us to connect face-to-face as well. We're very passionate about doing everything through intention, connection, and passion. So I really, I'm excited to do this Q&A to show you guys a little bit more about our mission and our goals, and that ultimately at the end of the day, we just want happy, healthy horses, not only here in Calgary, but all around the world. And we want to do that. We want to achieve that mission through these three main core values that we hold. So let's get right to it. If you have a question about anything, muscles, biomechanics, exercises, stretching, I have a list of questions here that were already submitted. You can feel free to use your video or audio function, raise your hand, or you can use the chat function to ask your questions. It can really be anything, and we can kind of go into a rabbit hole. Like I said, I have no direction. I just want to use this time to connect and to create some meaningful conversation with all of you. So here we go. I'll start off with actually a question that we received via our Instagram story. We got this question a few times, so I think that this is on everyone's mind right now. And this is with regards to spring conditioning tips, as well as spring, like specific stretches, activations, and exercises you can apply with your horses in spring. And I think this is a really important question to address, because it's like all of a sudden, it's green outside, restrictions are going up in Alberta. We're all feeling this like energy and this excitement to get back in the saddle and to really work with our horses. We have more time with them. So I think it is really important to address, well, how can we condition our athletes appropriately after the winter season, B, we have more time on our hands. And Caroline and I have been really noticing that there is also such a thing as too much conditioning too quickly, as well as we kind of move into this exciting, warm climate. Our horses are shedding their coats and they're feeling spunky. So also something to keep in mind there. Before I go into a few tips that I'd have for any horse owner, I just wanted to outline the differences in definition that we have for like exercises, stretches, and activations. All three are movement-based around our horses, but it's important that each of them have kind of a different role within their conditioning and training. So an activation is what I would apply before a ride. If you want to compare it to a human athlete, such as a runner, it would be like dynamic stretching, where you're getting some movement and some range of motion to wake up the tissue. A classic dynamic activation that I recommend to all of my equine athletes are either belly lifts or tail pulls. Those are full body core engaging activations that essentially just warm up the tissue, wake up the nervous system. It's kind of a misnomer because the nervous system is always on, but what it does is it prepares your horse for the movement that will come under saddle. So that's what an activation is. It's a dynamic range of motion that we recommend applying before you ride, and but you can apply afterwards. But it's a really, really great way to just get the blood flowing to all of the muscles you're about to work in your ride. Secondly, the exercise component, we kind of divide it up in hand and under saddle. So that would be like, let's say, I know a few of us lunge our horses before we ride them, or we do a lot of in-hand exercises like asking for forelimb or hind limb crossing over, backing up. Those are in-hand exercises. And then under saddle exercises, as you can kind of deduce yourself, are exercises that happen under saddle. So that would be, transition work from walk, trot to a canter, from extended to collected gait movements, from long trotting. And we like to actually further divide those exercises under saddle into cardio and into strength components as well. So as you can imagine, long trotting your horse is definitely higher cardio, higher aerobic capacity, versus let's say we're working on leg yielding or backing up or walking slowly over poles. That is definitely more strength focused. So it's very different, for instance, squatting with a set of weights versus running. There's different cardio components, and it does move the muscles differently. And then lastly would be stretching. So after the activations, the in-hand work, the under saddle work, either strength or cardio would be the stretching component. And we really, Caroline and I, we talk about this all the time. Even yesterday, we had a long conversation about it. We really recommend stretching after a ride. You might see other horse owners stretching before a ride, and obviously they know their horse their best, but you will ultimately get the most benefit from stretching your horse after a ride. Stretching is made to promote relaxation of the tissues and increase the flexibility of the tissues as well. So we really recommend that this stretching happens only after a ride. And so those are those. I just looked at the time. I'm like, I've been blabbing on about the definitions of activation, stretches, and exercises. So I apologize, because I don't want to just be the only one talking, although I get that that's a Q&A. But those are the definitions there. And if I were to choose what spring conditioning exercises I would give to my athletes across various disciplines, I would choose, I have 2 activations, I have 2 exercises, and 2 stretches that I would recommend. So in that order, of course. So obviously you would like to tailor it to your own horse. If your horse has an injury or is currently being seen by a veterinarian, just check in with them to make sure it's cool. Oh, I just saw the message here. No worries, Becky. I'm happy you made it. Happy to see you. Becky is a fellow body worker as well. She owns Whispering Equine Bodyworks, I believe it's called. So I'm happy that we have another bodyworker here on the call too. Yeah, so my 2 activations that I recommend, I kind of already highlighted them before. They're 2 full body activations. So the belly lift and the hind and tail pull. I think the hind and tail pull might already be on our YouTube channel. Unfortunately, I can't really demo it that well here, but if any of you are interested in receiving a PDF for those, I'm happy to email them out to you. So you just have to reach out, and I'm happy to send you a little PDF that shows you how to do it. The reason why I'm choosing full body activations this spring is because it's important, especially if your horse has been off for the winter for a long time, that we're activating all of the tissues and waking up all of the tissues before we ride them as best as we can. And the tail pull and belly lifts do exactly that. Nextly, under saddle or in hand, I really recommend taking this time to, for me, it's always about building the core first, relaxing the back tissues, building the core, engaging the hind end. So the exercises I would recommend for spring that you incorporate in your program, you know, not every day or whatnot, but would be to set up some ground poles, and only at a walk, just walk over poles that are either slightly lifted or right on the ground, because that's going to engage core, that's going to activate quads, that's going to elongate hamstrings, that's going to ask your horse to energetically move from behind over the poles. And if you notice that your horse is stumbling over the poles, then you know that we need to continue working on strengthening them before we can ask them, you know, to trot over the poles, for instance. So it gives you a good base to start with to see where they're at fitness wise, and you can add levels to it by adding more poles, changing the distances between poles, raising the poles slightly, increasing the cadence of your ride. There's so many different components you can add to increase the difficulty, but I always recommend, especially at spring, just starting at the base and seeing where your horse is at. So yeah, pole work. And then the second one I would recommend is slowly getting into transition work as well. So many of our horses have been a little bit heavier on their forehand in the winter, especially since like 4 weeks ago it was -20. So a really, really great effective way to help connect the hind end to the front end and kind of start asking for more of that collection and more of that energy to come from the hind end forward is to work on transition work, either with, I like to separate it either like within a gait or between a walk and a trot. And what I mean is I get a little dressage on that, where you can, you know, that when you're walking out your horse, you can do like a long and low, super chill walk, or you can ask for a walk that's in quite a collected frame. And even that transition from like a collected walk to an extended walk has a really big impact on that connectivity between hind end and front end. Alternatively, just working through trot to walk transitions is super helpful as well. As for stretching, as we move into that, I would recommend for sure stretching out the hind limbs, especially the hip flexors. And I think I'm super biased when I say that, because I am a runner, and runners get tight hip flexors. But essentially, when we're asking our horses to walk and trot and canter in an arena or outside, they are going to get tight hip flexors pretty quickly here if we are not meticulously stretching them out. So the hip flexor and hamstring stretches are certainly what I'd recommend. So anyone who watches this video here, either live on Zoom or on YouTube later, please feel free to reach out if you want those kind of this spring conditioning program that I kind of just laid out for everyone. So yeah, there are a few more questions, but let's open the floor to everyone who is patiently waiting on the edge of their seat to ask a question, or they want Brigitte to stop talking, or whatever. So are there any questions out there? You can either use the chat function, or you can raise your hands. And yeah. Oh, I know. Shelbs, go ahead.
A question. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Because you just made me think of when you said about running and hip flexors. Because this is something I'm going through right now because I just started working out.
I'm so happy.
Can horses get shin splints?
Ooh. You know what? You'd have to ask them, but they can. I don't know. I would say they can. Great answer, right? You know what? Let's just bring that full circle and we'll just ask the horse. I think that they can definitely experience that kind of, like, one, can they get them? Probably. Two, how we would observe that is how their protraction phase would change. So I'd argue like a horse that, okay, like let's say I just spent the last 3 weeks just like long trotting my horses and I haven't been stretching them out, and we've been increasing our cardio and I'm asking for a lot of backing up and we're getting straight into really super collected movements. They're going to have tight hip flexors, especially if I haven't been stretching them out. So what will happen is that do I have a picture of a horse? I just cleaned my office, so I don't even know. Oh, I do. Okay, 1 second, because I'll show you on the horse here. Okay, so I'm going to show you. It's very similar. Oh my God, is this just a written book? Okay, here we go. It's very similar to what happens in runners with tight hip flexors or tight glutes. Let's see here. This is an image from Equinology. This is not my own image, so everyone knows. Can everyone see the horse here?
Yeah.
Is it bright enough? Okay. So hip flexors, we have the quads right here. We have that fine ass glute muscle right here too. And what happens is that if we're not stretching out these hip flexors, to stretch them out, we just bring that hind limb backwards, okay? If we're not stretching them out, we can just picture that tension is building up in through here. So when tension builds up, the muscles stay contracted, okay? So how I like to picture it is I like to picture that this area of muscle stays contracted, which inherently means that as you move further down, the contractile phase of those muscles will continue down as you reach the stifle here as well. And your horse will start recruiting other muscles because these muscles are tight. And then we'll start seeing some compensatory mechanisms. So what you would see is the tight hip flexors here moving through the stifle and then down through the hock as well. What you'll see then is that the tension here will actually result in a shorter retraction phase. They won't be able to stretch their hind leg as far back, which then will result in reduced spring of that leg moving forward, and you'll see a shortened protraction phase as well. So you'll actually just see a shortness in step moving forward and when they move back. So under saddle, what you might feel or what you might see is that hind limb isn't going as far forward because the tension in the hip flexors has moved down. So I think that would be equivalent to a shin splint kind of feeling as well. Does that help?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I was just thinking, like, for me, because I haven't ran or done anything in a while, so obviously that's going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I was just thinking the same of horses, that are getting back to work, that like on a concussive surface, it must be kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it totally is. And it's really crazy how quickly you can see the compensatory mechanisms. Like, think about it. Like, if you go out to run right now on a sidewalk and it's like ouchy, you're not just going to like keep in the same, you know, like you're not just going to like keep moving the same way. You're going to avoid it. Like, you know, by the third step, you're like, this is uncomfortable. I'm going to avoid it. I'm either going to keep my leg closer to the other leg. I'm going to go for a longer stride on the other side. I'm going to shorten this stride, and you're going to immediately adapt to that pain. So it is quite quickly that we see compensatory mechanisms that show up, because the horse is like, yeah, I'm in pain, so I'm not going to move this way, and I'm going to recruit something else. And it can happen, you know, in one ride, right? Mm-hmm. Super question. Love it.
So what do you think, like, as we're bringing horses back, or my horses have had about a month off, mm-hmm. Do you think it's best to start with like interval, like trot 4 minutes, walk 2 minutes, trot 4 minutes, call it day one? Or what's the best way to kind of bring them back, both like physically and cardio wise?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Yeah, I think that I think one, they should be brought back slowly. I think actually what would be a good way to bring them back is to set up a plan for those horses. So let's say, like, you know, your horse is pretty good. And you know that, like, in August last year, they were able to hold a canter quite comfortably for 10 minutes or something like that. Let's just say, like, a goal that's very achievable that they've done before, or that, you know, you can get to. And so I would say, like, that is, like, let's say that's our goal, holding a canter for 10 minutes. Obviously we don't, you know, it's going to take some time to get there, and working your way backwards to set up appropriate intervals for training for that is definitely a great way. So I love that you suggested intervals. I think it changes from horse to horse, and that if you can be flexible, like if you notice, like, okay, we do a 2-minute walk and then a 1-minute trot, and then we're back to a 2-minute walk, and then we do a 1.5-minute trot, and you notice that your horse is just like gassed already, which is, I'm sure, not the case, but, like, you know, let's just say your horse is already like this faster tempo, this faster interval, I'm already like super exhausted. That's when you do risk them through fatigue, you know, having a misstep or starting to recruit other muscles, because, you know, their glutes are weak right now, their quads are weak, that kind of thing. So the only thing with interval training is I would, one, connect it to an end goal, and two, I would just also be flexible and really observe how your horse is breathing as you increase the tempo. Ideally, Shelby and I are actually working on this to bring heart rate monitors for horses, because the best way to actually do interval training is by watching that aerobic threshold and seeing the heart rate. Yeah. So the other great way that I would recommend bringing them back, of course, with, you know, a suitable activation and stretching program, but is also, like I had mentioned before, like being intentional with, like, your cardio days and your strength days. So if you do strength every day, like if you're focusing on tight turns or barrels or backing up or pulls or anything, if you're doing that, you know, 5 days in a row, then that's a lot on their body, and vice versa if you're doing, you know, cardio every day 5 days in a row. So choosing, you know, like, let's say you want to ride 4 days a week, doing 2 strength days and 2 cardio days, and then, you know, on those cardio days, maybe throwing in some intervals. Yeah.
Cool. Okay.
I hope that's helpful. It's kind of hard because it does need to be specific with the horse, but I would say, like, start off slower, because, yeah, when you haven't gone running for a month, you know, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, yo, I feel it. So same thing.
Cool. I have another question.
Mm.
So a horse, like, I know Ruby and Stevie better because I've had them longer, and I kind of know, like, Ruby, her weaker spot can be helped with belly lifts. Like, she's one to kind of pot out or get a little bit. But the third horse that I have, Marion, I don't know how to combat. If I was to say her weaker side would almost be like she's a longer horse, so her bum elongates instead of like being round. Would that be lots of backing up and picking up because she's long and probably just kind of stretches out? Or what would combat that to make her a complete athlete?
Yeah, I think I have a picture of her in my head. I think, yes, definitely focusing on like getting that thoracolumbar rounding. That's what that's called, when you get the lower part of the back in the back that sits above the glutes to round and come underneath them. But I also think that if she is responsive to the belly lifts, that is also super helpful, because although it's showing up as like kind of a flat bum versus like a cute little peach bum, what is also happening there is that she needs to build her glute tissue. But one of the best ways to help promote that glute tissue to come under and round is if that core is engaged. So I can show you with my little horse diagram again. So yeah, we want the rounding here, but the rounding and this hind limb isn't going to come underneath the horse unless this core is activated. So with Marion, I would apply belly lifts, and I would focus on that thoracolumbar rounding via backing up, but she'll need a strong core in order to be able to build the glute. So it's kind of this like feedback loop.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions live? I do have one more question from a horse owner, and then a couple questions from some professionals. So if no one has any questions, I can get into it. I actually really like this question. I got this from a client of mine in Edmonton, and she isn't on the call, but she's going to watch it later. She had a question about senior horses and how to keep them limber and toned when you're not able to ride as much either. So it's like kind of like that double-edged sword, right? You have an older horse. Unfortunately, your schedule doesn't permit to ride them as frequently, but you know that movement is key for our older horses. So how can you help your horse, lead with their best hoof forward when you're not around them as frequently, and when they're also continuing to take laps around the sun and getting a little bit older? One of the best recommendations I have is to make sure that they are getting daily walking. Whether, like, I'm not saying like you have to, again, you can't go out and walk your horse every day, but it's definitely really helpful for senior horses to be in a space where they can move on their own, and with that also socialize with other horses to help their movement. And daily walking for any senior horse is invaluable and will really, really help in terms of reducing stiffness from arthritis, for instance, as well. So just like with any athlete, I feel like this is like the classic VE answer, but movement is key to promote blood flow and to reduce inflammation and to build strength. So when, let's say you have a senior horse, they're like 17, 19, 23 years old, whatever you would categorize as senior. Like for me, a senior horse is like 30 these days, because our technology is so far in advance that I feel like I've met some pretty non-senior acting horses at age 23. But whatever you would categorize, I would actually recommend, aside from them being in a larger paddock socializing with other horses, I would recommend that the best thing you can do is, like, you know, if you're out there 2 times a week, is to plan those rides. Make sure that they're actually getting a combination of cardio and of strength training in those rides, that it's not all cardio, that it's not all strength, but that it's actually a combination, so that at the end of the day, you're working on flexing and extending as many of their joints as possible, as well as increasing their heart rate to help promote, again, more circulation. The other thing I do advise with senior horses is to spend a little more time warming up and cooling down. So as you can imagine, you know, they may have weaker muscles in certain areas. So it's particularly important to avoid any injury or strain or stress on their joints, to really focus on the warm up and cool down. The last point I'll say to that as well is that our senior horses tend to want to lean more and stand heavier in their forehand. They're not working as much. We're not asking them to pick up their hind end or engage their hind end as much. So they'll be leaning more forward, which results in a lot of shoulder, thoracic sling, lower neck, wither pocket tension. So I like to, again, with that intentional ride, I like to really promote movement coming from the hind end when I'm working with senior horses, just to avoid, because, you know, like the 23 hours a day you're not with them, they're standing on their shoulders, increasing the tension, increasing the kind of muscle fiber there. So I think it's really important, aside from also doing like a part cardio, part strength training program when you're riding them or when you're out there with them, is to also continue to focus on that hind end and on that core, so that, again, you don't have to worry about them being too heavy on their forehand. Mm-hmm. I hope that was clear. She can't be here to see that, but that answer yet. But yeah, we've all seen a downhill horse with no back. So it's all about core and hind end, which is actually funny because we were just talking about the core and the hind end with even our young guns. So maybe it's the same, but different. Cool. Any other questions about anything? I'm going to get into a little bit of like a horse professional question next, but I'm happy to answer anything. I'm an open book. I really am. Paige and Shelby know that. Karen does too. I'm sure Becky's figured that out as well. Okay, awesome. Well, the next question, I think, comes from one of the lovely women that is on this call, but I can't quite remember. But this was a question from a body worker, and her question was, what are your best tips on building a client base as a new therapist and getting regular clients? So a super good question, and also a really like brave question to ask, because it's very easy to be a new therapist on the scene and kind of be like, oh, I want to get to where this therapist is, but I don't know how, and I can't do it. And they're, and so I think it's really brave of you to ask, because 5 years ago, I had that same question too. And the number one piece of advice that I practiced 5 years ago, and I still practice, is one, to be yourself. So there are a lot of equine therapists out there that all have kind of a different focus, a different approach, obviously, because we're all different human beings. But I would say the best way to build your client base is to figure out who you are, ultimately what you want to bring to the horse, what you're passionate about. And yes, like I love horses and I want to help horses feel their best, and so do you. So really dialing into who you are, and then who do you want as your ideal client as well. Well, my ideal client is someone else who also really loves horses, but I also would like, I also bring quite a scientific approach to what I do. So my ideal client is also someone who appreciates, the scientific method and the reasoning behind that as well. So trying to be someone else or trying to follow another business model, I find is not, it could, I'm sure it could work, but it's not as effective because you don't actually get to be who you are and contribute your energetic piece to the world. So my number one best tip on building a new client base is to truly be yourself and showcase that. I'd love if Shelby could maybe chime in with some marketing tips on how that might look like, either on a social media platform or on like a face-to-face platform as well. But I do want to say, like, I totally understand the struggle of building a client base, because you're so excited and you want to work on as many horses as possible. But slowly but surely, Vitality Equine didn't build their client base overnight. And I definitely compared myself and had a lot of negative self-talk as I was growing. But everyone starts somewhere, and it starts with how you want to help and serve your clients best, and really being you. Because at the end of the day, you are building a client base that you want to work with day in and day out. So, taking the time to figure out what you want, who you are, will ultimately be better in the long run as well. Shelbs, would you like to chime in and add maybe a few pointers as well? I was pretty, what was I going to say? I wasn't as scientific with that answer.
Yeah, for sure. I would say that I think the most important part, like just in for marketing in general, not even based on social media. Paige and Brigitte will know that I say this a lot, and it's really important to identify the one thing that sets you apart from the rest. So it doesn't matter if there's thousands of body workers. There's going to be one specific thing that sets you apart and makes you different, and that is going to attract someone's going to be interested in that exact point, and that's going to help you build that market. I think Bridgette's gift is really that she is so relatable and she is herself, but she can talk to you in a scientific way, but make it so that you can understand it. And that's what draws me to her and working with her, because it is very science based, but it's easy. She makes things easy for everyone else to understand. And so I think that you have to recognize, everyone has a gift, and it's just tapping into that one specific thing and then capitalizing your business on that. I think that also a key point, and I talk about this a lot, is it actually, by targeting a niche market, you are actually going to experience more growth, exponential growth, than trying to serve everyone. So if you're just starting out, I'm not a body worker, but this is from a marketing perspective what I would do. If you're just starting out, pick a discipline, pick a specific type of customer. If it's, young riders, if it's, more less competitive riders that really want a high standard of care for their horses, and they might go on trail rides, or, pick a very niche market and start there. And because if you're tailoring your services to hit that niche market, then the social proof is going to be there to help expand within that market, and then it will grow on its own beyond that. Actually, one of my posts today, one of my business posts, is that I find the biggest mistake is that people make when they're starting out is they try to focus on too many things. So don't focus on a million different things. Although you might have so many great ideas, focus on one thing, focus on that one market and let that grow. And then everything else will kind of build on each other from there.
Actually, yeah, that's a super great point that you bring up, Shelbs, because what I do find in the equine bodywork world, we go to school and we're super excited to learn about massage, about how it can help the horse, about the impacts, all of the stretches, everything that we can learn. And ultimately, like, we're so excited to help horses, which is amazing. But what ends up happening is it's like all of a sudden you feel this drive, or maybe it's a pressure, or maybe it's it's just from that excitement too, but you feel this need to want to, I want to add another modality. I want to take a taping class. I want to take a neurokinetic class. I want to take this other advanced massage therapy class. I want to go do all of this like continued education before really like mastering and getting a handle of honestly the basics of massage. I believe that if you are, if you take a massage, like a reputable massage course, that you can create just as many changes through the knowledge you learn from that course, from your energy with the horse, from the vibe, as you could a body worker who's been working for 5 years, for instance. Like, I really think, all of us that work with horses, it's about that deeper connection and that energy as well. And I see a lot of body workers who go to school and are super stoked on school, but then keep just going to school and not really mastering that concept. So that's like not really in conjunction. I mean, it's relatable in that you said don't overwhelm and feel like you need to work with the Olympic eventer and also the trail rider, we don't need an ego with that, focusing on your ideal client, but also focusing on your ideal approach, like master of none, expert. What's that expression? You know what I'm saying though, right? I forget what the expression is, but
I can't think of what it is, but I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah, it's like, and so I did that. I remember I took my Equinology 100 course in 2015. And then right after I did, 3 other courses, like within a year. And these were pretty time consuming long courses with externships of 6 months and that kind of thing. So I was super excited, which was great, but it wasn't allowing me to like really refine and focus on what I'm passionate about. Because what I am passionate about is not being able to do all the things, but is be able to help the horse with the tool that I have. So that is a very body worker specific recommendation I have. Is I love that you're all about continued education, but to also just like take a step back, and you can spend like a year, 2 years with just a massage therapy course modality. You don't need to jump right into being able to tape or being able to do whatever. If you want to, by all means, but yeah. Oh, I love that, Becky. Yeah, you're committed to one core course a year max. I love that. And honestly, one that fulfills your continuing education requirements, perfect, and allows you to also absorb that knowledge and then to keep refining the skills that you already have. But I definitely see that a lot. Yay. And then the second part of that question was, how do you get regular clients? I think it would be advisable to not focus on getting regular clients, but rather reframe and focus on providing, an authentic powerful and meaningful massage each time, and connecting with clients who are on your level, are your ideal client. And the regularness or the stability and the peace that you'll get from building the regular clientele will just come from you being yourself, attracting those clients that do want to use your services on a regular basis. But I would maybe reframe the question and kind of look at it from a perspective of how can you continue to be you. Becky writes, her tip is don't give up, be consistent, provide an amazing service and communication with the clients you have. They will share the word. And that's so true. All of us know in the horse world that there is a lot of word of mouth marketing that happens. So if you are you and you love what you do and you love the horses, then it won't come naturally, but it'll come with hard work and with consistency and with you being in tune to you as well. In Alberta, I don't know if the question asker is in Alberta, but in Alberta, there are over 1 million horses, or close to just under 1 million horses. So there is no shortage of horses to work on. We're also in this very exciting time where horse massage therapy is very popular and is increasingly becoming part of a regular program for not only Olympic athletes, not even just the competitive, weekend athletes, but it's even people that own horses and ride them, once to twice a week. It is very much integrating within the equine health and wellness community, because we recognize that movement and proper movement and biomechanics is key to the longevity, happiness, and health of all of our horses. So there is not a shortage of horses. There is room for a lot of people in the industry, and I would, so that's just my little pep talk is you guys got this. And if you ever have any questions or you ever want to reach out about anything, horse owners or horse professionals alike, please do, because I know we all want to see happy and healthy equine athletes at the end of the day.
Thanks so much for tuning in to our recording of our Zoom webinar. If you're interested in attending any of our live events, visit our website at www.vitalityequine.com/webinars. We have 2 more exciting webinars happening this May that you won't want to miss out on. Thanks so much, and be sure to comment, like, subscribe. Have a great day.